Classes. JavaScript classes allow you to combine properties and methods. To code along with this lesson, open the file index.html in the folder Start Lesson 8. To create a new class, you use the keyword class, then the name of the class you're creating followed by curly braces. JavaScript's a big fan of curly braces. If you need to initialize values in a class, you need a special function called a constructor. This function is called when you create a new instance of this class. To clear up all this terminology, let's create a simple class to represent a 2D point. We enter class, all lowercase, then the class name. We'll call it point. Then the curly braces, and for a point we'll need two parameters, an x value and a y value. The constructor function is where we initialize the class properties. Inside a class you need to use this to access the class instance. We set this.x to the pass parameter x and this.y to y. That's it. To create a new instance of a point, simply enter const point equals new point 2065. Save your work and open Start Lesson 8 index.html using Live Server. If you enter PT, you will see that you have an instance of a point. The great thing about classes is the way we can add methods. Before we see this in action, let's create a new class. This time it's a class to represent a rectangle. We'll have left, top, width and height as parameters. Like we did with the point class, we copy the parameters to the class properties using the this keyword. Now we can create two instances of the rectangle class using new rectangle and four parameters. Parameter 1 is the left position, parameter 2 the top position, parameter 3 is the width, and parameter 4 the height. If you save your work and back in the browser allow Live Server time to refresh, then enter rect1, you'll see the parameters of the first rectangle. So far, this isn't very different from an object. Let's start to explore how it does differ. We're going to add a special kind of property to the class. If we use the keyword get, we can then enter a function with no parameters that returns a value. If we use this syntax, it's called a getter property. It's used to add a property that can be calculated from other class properties. We'll create a getter property that returns the area of the rectangle. This is simply width times height. Don't forget to use this for class properties. Save, let Live Server refresh the browser and enter rect1.area. We get the value 5000. 100 times 50. Notice we just use the property name area, no brackets. If you do add brackets, you'll get rect1area is not a function, because this special kind of function, a getter property, cannot be called like a standard JavaScript function. It appears to anything calling it as though it's a property of the class. Now let's create a method. Inside a class, a method does not use the function keyword. You just use the name of the method, then any parameters inside brackets, and finally the code for the method inside curly braces. Let's create a method that moves the rectangle. We'll use the parameters x and y. X to indicate the movement to the left property, and y the movement to the top property. We simply use the plus equals operator. Remember, this.left plus equals x is the same as this.left equals this.left plus x. It's simply a shortcut way of scripting this. Save, browser refresh and enter rect1.move 0, 100. Now if you enter rect1, the top value is 110, not the original 10 value that the rectangle was when we created it. Now for a more complex method. We're going to create a method that takes another rectangle as a parameter and returns true if the passed rectangle overlaps with the rectangle calling the method, and false if there's no overlap. To do this, we'll create 4 points, the top left and bottom right of each rectangle. If left of rect1 L1.x is greater than the right edge of rect2 R2.x, then there cannot be an overlap. If the left edge of rect2 is greater than the right edge of rect1, then equally there can't be an overlap, and this completes the horizontal test. Next we test vertically. For this we test if the top edge of rect1 is below the bottom edge of rect2, or the top edge of rect2 is below the bottom edge of rect1. If either of these are true, then there can't be an overlap. For an overlap to occur, all of these four conditions must be false. If that's the case, then we can return true. So what about the code? L1 is this left and this top. R1 is this dot left plus this dot width, and this dot top minus this dot height. L2 is the past rect left, past rect top, and R2 is the past rect dot left plus its width, past rect top, minus its height. Now the tests. L1.x greater or equal to R2.x, or L2.x greater or equal to R1.x, return false. We use the logical OR operator, two vertical lines, so that if either of these are true, we return false. There's no overlap. And to test vertically, L1.y less than or equal to R2.y, or L2.y less than or equal to R1.y, return false. And that completes the conditions to return false. So if none of these return false by this point, then we do have an overlap, so return true. Let's finally enter some messages that use the methods we've created. First we'll display the area of rect1 using the getter property area. Then we'll use the overlap method to print an overlap message to the console. Then we'll use the move method to move rect1, and now we'll repeat the overlap message. Initially the rectangles overlap like this. After moving rect1, they're like this with no overlap. Save, refresh the browser, and you get three messages. The area of rect1, and then two messages about the overlap of rect1 and rect2. The first is true, the second after the move call is false. Great work! Classes connect properties and methods in a way that makes code clearer. As your code gets more complex, you're likely to use more than one text file to store your code. When this happens, a great way to load the code is to use modules, and we'll look at this in the next lesson. Keep watching.